genetic diseases. So we have cystic fibrosis, which is caused by a recessive allele, and cystic fibrosis is life-threatening because it can cause mucus to build up in the airways and in the pancreas. Too much mucus in the airways can cause chest infections, and it can cause it difficult to breathe. Pancreas can get blocked, and as a result, digestive enzymes won't be released, so you can't digest your food, and then therefore the person will not be able to have nutrition and grow very well. These people actually have to take a whole cup of tablets of just enzymes while they're having their food in order to be able to digest their food properly. And finally, their reproductive organs can get blocked by mucus, and as a result, sperm and egg will not be able to meet, and therefore they can't have kids. However, luckily, it's only caused by a recessive allele, therefore the chance of having it is quite low. If a person has big F, little f, they'll be normal but carrier, which means that they appear normal. They won't have any problems. However, if they breed with another carrier or with a sufferer, then there's a chance that their kids could have the disease. Polydactyly, on the other hand, is caused by a dominant allele, so it's more frequent. However, it's not life-threatening because you only have an extra finger. Those are differences. Variation. So variation is differences between individuals of the same species. So for example, you can see human beings, we're all the same species, but if we look at each other, we're different. And there's two reasons behind that. One is because of genetic differences. So and also the other one is because of environmental differences. So things that are only affected by genes is your, for example, eye color, your blood group, if you have any inherited diseases, your gender. Environmental is language. So, for example, if you're born to a parents from a particular country, it doesn't mean that you're going to automatically speak that language of that country. So, because again, it's environmental, suntan and color of leaves on a plant. And finally, some things are affected by both. So, height and weight. Your height is determined by your genes, but whether you have enough nutrition to get to that level depends on your environment. Okay, natural selection. Another word for this is also known as survival of the fittest. It's a theory proposed by Charles Darwin, and the way it works is the following. You have variation. So if you look at this example, you can see that giraffes have different sized necks, and they're all eating from leaves of the tree. Eventually, the leaves near the bottom of the tree finish, and so the ones with shorter necks die, and only the longer necks survive. And over time, the giraffe necks get longer and longer. So how do we talk about natural selection? If it's a 5-marker in our exam, we said the following points. Number 1, variation exists due to mutations. Number 2, there's a selective pressure. So here, for example, something that threatens the survival of the population. For example, it could be lack of food. It could be a new predator. It could be change in the environment. It could be competition between giraffes, etc. Some individuals will be better adapted. So they will be able to survive, reproduce, and pass on their genes. And over time, these genes will become more frequent. Okay. Now, on a side note, Lamarck was another scientist, and he proposed the idea of acquired characteristics. So, for example, let's say a person goes to the gym, they work out and get really big biceps, etc. Does it mean that their kid is going to have also big biceps? No. So that's Lamarck's proposal of acquired characteristics. So we know that's not correct. Now, speciation. In fact, before we go to that, let's go back to natural selection again. What we see over here, this is just a blueprint. It's like a rough structure. In your exam, they won't ask you to give out the structure. They will say, for example, they'll give you a picture like this. They'll say, okay, look, you have some grasshoppers on the left and grasshoppers on the right. So this is before on the left, and on the right is now. Explain how this happens. So this is talking about natural selection. So you have to use those 5 points and modify it for the particular example. So here, for example, what would you say? You'd say, okay, on the left, you can see grasshoppers have different colors due to mutations. Then we'll say that the green grasshopper was able to hide in the grass because it was able to camouflage, so it was not eaten by predators. Over time, this green grasshopper was able to survive, reproduce, and pass on its genes. And then finally, over time, green colors became more popular in the population. Okay. Moving on to speciation. This is when, first of all, before we talk about that, what is the definition of a species? They are individuals that can interbreed to produce fertile offspring. So it means, for example, if a horse and a donkey, for example, breed, they make a mule. But the mule can't have any more kids because it's infertile, which means that the horse and donkey are not from the same species. Okay, so again, how does speciation work? So if you look at the picture at the bottom, you have a population of the same species, then a physical barrier. For example, it could be a mountain range, or maybe they even migrate to different parts. The two groups migrate to opposite parts of the land, so they get separated basically. Then the conditions on each side is different. There are different selective pressures on each side. So therefore, natural selection takes place differently. For example, the ones at the top, they grow longer necks. The ones at the bottom, they grow longer tails, etc. Something different. And over time, if you were to take individuals from each species, bring them together, they've become so different now they can't breed anymore to make fertile offspring, and therefore now they have become two separate species. Selective breeding is similar to natural selection. The only difference is that human beings decide what characteristic should be picked and should continue to the next generation. So, for example, in this scenario, we can see that the plants at the bottom, let's say the humans want taller plants, so they pick the tallest ones, they make them breed, and then from the offspring, they pick the tallest ones, they make them breed, and they do this for several generations until over time you see that all the plants have become taller, etc. So this is not just plants but also animals as well. So there's pros and cons, so make sure you understand all of those. For example, this cow was selectively bred to become this muscular. So what happened is, with bigger cows, of course, there's more meat, so more yield for the farmer, so you can make more profit. I'll move the picture because it's getting a bit chunky. Anyway, so what happens is, take the most muscular cows, breed them from the offspring, get the most muscular ones, breed those, and then over time, you'll see that the offspring or the population of cows will become more and more muscular, and that's something maybe the farmer wants to produce. Okay, genetic engineering. So here, this is where you actually take genes from one organism, cut it, and then place it into another organism. So the way that works is the following. Let's say at the top, we have the human gene for insulin. So over here, this is human DNA. This is the gene for human insulin. Now we're going to cut that using something called restriction enzymes. Now when we cut that gives us sticky ends. Okay, then we take a plasmid. This is a ring from bacteria. Again, we cut that open with the same restriction enzymes so that the sticky ends over here and these ones match. We take this, we put it into the plasmid, and finally we use an enzyme called ligase to join them together. Once this plasmid has human DNA, we put that plasmid into a bacteria. We allow the bacteria to replicate. When it replicates, all the new bacteria have the same human DNA, so they're all now going to start making human insulin. That is then extracted and put into a bottle, and it's sold to the market. Okay, so genetic engineering is not just for human insulin, but for many other things, like you can, for example, genetically engineer plants to become herbicide resistant, which means that they won't be affected by chemicals that you use to kill weeds. So that again, also another example is golden rice. Golden rice is genetically engineered to produce vitamin A. So what happens is vitamin A is made mainly in carrots. So that gene is cut from the carrots and is put into rice. And then rice now can make vitamin A. So why do we do that? The reason is because carrots take much more energy to grow, whereas rice can grow much more quickly. So in poor countries, people grow rice more often. Therefore, those people can also benefit from the same nutrients as carrots. Main thing is that vitamin A is important for eyesight. So people who don't have vitamin A, they will go blind. Pretty much. Disadvantage, however, is that sometimes what can happen is, let's say you make a plant herbicide resistant. Now that gene could actually escape into the wild and then go into other plants. So maybe it can go into a weed. Now that weed will also become herbicide resistant. So it becomes into superweed, for example. Again, this is a problem because we don't want that to happen. So there are pros and cons of both. So again, here are the points. Make sure